All right. So now that we have a good appreciation of some of the history surrounding the art of animation, I wanted to kind of dive into our animation software today and really take a look and help you guys understand how it works, because it is a little different. It is a little weird, okay? But remember the root desire, the goal here of what it is that we're trying to create. We're trying to create a whole series of individual drawings, right? Individual drawings that's going to be played back at a frame rate, okay? For our earlier discussion, what is that frame rate? 24 frames a second, okay? Now this is an important thing to remember, especially for us in kind of our modern, broadcast and cinema world, because there are many different types of frame rates out there. But during the Genesis era of the cinema industry, there was only 24, right? That was it, okay? Here's a good little factoid for you cinema nerds out there like me. In the early days of cinematography, what was the determining characteristic, the qualifying kind of mark, if you will, for camera operators? What determined whether or not you got hired or fired as a camera operator? You're strong. The cameras were very big, okay? How did they advance the film through the gate in the early cinema days? You guys probably have seen it. They did. They had to manually crank it, right? So this big handle on the side of your cameras. Bingo. That's what got you a job, if you could manually, consistently do this, right? Which is not an easy thing to do at a very defined frame rate, and you can't speed up or slow down, because if you sped up or slowed down, it would change how fast and how slow the movements would appear on screen, right? So you had to have this consistent kind of crank motion, and that was the determining qualifying kind of trait, if you will, of early cinema camera operators, which I find is absolutely mind-boggling, right? That's what got you a job. Can you do this? Right? If the answer to that question is yes, very consistently, congratulations, you're now a cinematographer, right? Right. Yeah. It was the beginnings. Everything is kind of rough and loose in the beginnings of the cinema industry. Okay. So before we jump into our software, I just wanted to bring us back over to Canvas here for a second and begin to kind of showcase and communicate how we're going to be managing all of our homework and our lab assignments, because we're going to roll out our first homework and our first lab assignment this very day. So I'm in Canvas, the GCOM 400 shell. If you go into the modules section right here, okay, naturally we're no longer in week 1, so we'll close that. Oops, I just expanded it. We are in week 2, okay? And this is how I'm going to communicate all of our homework and lab assignments in this class. I'm going to put them in their own separate little categories, okay? So it's going to make it very, very easy for you to find the homework that's due and the lab assignments that have been issued during class, okay? So please come back to the module section to turn in and get the details on all of our homework and lab assignments. Now, on every single homework and lab assignment, you can see that there are defined due dates associated with it. I don't know, September 13th, I don't think that's the due date for this section. I have 2 different sections of GCOM 400 this semester. I have a Tuesday and a Thursday section. And for whatever reason, whenever I log in and do student view, it arbitrarily assigns this instance of my student view to one of those sections. So I believe the 13th is the due date for the Thursday section, not the Tuesday section. Point being, and I'm going to confirm this now because I'm really curious. Is it Thursday? Point being, be very, very mindful of these dates, okay? Specifically, if you take a look at it. Good. It's supposed to say the 11th because that's next Tuesday, right? So that's good. That's good. Like I said, this September 13th date, whenever I do student view as an instructor, it arbitrarily assigns me to one of the sections. Point being, and this is very specific for you guys, look at the top row of every single homework and assignment sheet, okay? It's going to tell you specifically when this assignment is due, okay? It's also going to tell you how many points it's worth and what you're supposed to do, okay? You are submitting a file. We'll go through that here in a minute, okay? So you're not going to be submitting, typing in something in a text entry box or doing some sort of math equation. You're going to be submitting a file. In addition, it's also going to tell you how many days you have to turn this assignment in. As a reminder, there's always going to be a point inside of our calendar when it's no longer possible for you to receive points on this assignment, okay? So please keep that in mind. Keep that in mind, okay? If you want full points, you submit by the due date. And then every day, literally every moment after that due date, your points will be removed from your overall mark, okay? We went over that last week with the late policy. So keep a little eyeball on all of these dates. Canvas does an excellent job, and I really do mean an excellent job in communicating these dates and reminding you of when things are due. You're going to both love and hate it if you've never worked in Canvas, because you're going to get a lot of notifications, a lot of reminders that things are due. Yeah?
By the way, I had a reminder. Your video is starting right now.
Oh, fantastic. So someone has subscribed to my YouTube channel, and they got the notification that we are now live on the internets, okay, which is pretty fun. Someone asked me this last week, and I don't remember if it was in this class or in another class, but this live stream will be made available the moment I hit the stop button. Okay, so right when I finish up class today and I hit stop streaming, it's on YouTube, which is pretty cool. So there's no post-processing or delay in getting all the content, especially if you need to go back in and review some of the tools and the technology that we discussed during class. Okay, so please use it. I think it's going to be pretty neat. Okay. All right, before we walk away from the mechanics of working with our assignments, when you're done, okay, and this is the pendulum, this is what we're going to be doing this week. Okay, we'll come back to the example here in a second, okay. When you're done, at the bottom of every single assignment sheet, okay, I've given you some naming conventions that I would like you to use when turning in all of your assignments, okay. These are the two things that you're going to be submitting for this very project. For almost every single project that we create in here, you're going to be turning in your raw Adobe Animate project file, okay, whose extension is .fla. Now, going forward in the future, this second thing is going to change. We're going to keep it pretty easy this week, and we're going to submit a GIF file, okay, which is a great web animation player. This is step one. Step two, we'll get into more complex submission processes that will give us the most accurate read and the most accurate reproduction of our timeline of our animation outside of Animate, okay. Please follow the naming conventions. This makes life on my side very, very, very easy, okay? Also, you're more than welcome. I see a lot of people like copying and pasting this. Awesome, but just naturally make sure you turn in or you change this to your last name. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten something that just says last name GCOM 400, okay? If you don't put your name on it, you didn't do it, okay? Because remember, there are almost 30 of you in this class. Every single week, you guys are going to be turning in 2 files per homework, right? And then we also going to have a lab assignment almost every single week. So I now have almost over 100 individual things that I now have to manage on my end for just one section. I'm teaching 2 sections, so I got like 200 of these things a week that I now have to manage. The naming conventions really, really help me process all this data and grade and give you feedback in a timely manner. If I have to hunt things down, it slows down the entire mechanism. So please follow these naming conventions. This is also a really great practice for us to follow out there in the real world. You know, the hallmark of a professional is one that names their files cleanly, clearly, and concisely. This is a good structure to use on all the projects that we use out there in the professional world. I've been using this structure for years, and it's fantastic. If you take a look at the big picture idea of the naming convention system that I've created, we start with the most general description of this file, which is, of course, your last name, okay? And then, after each underscore, we get a little bit more specific as to the role and the purpose of this file inside of the larger system as a whole, okay? When you're working at Pixar or Industrial Light and Magic or any of these big animation studios, you're accessing all of your files, unfortunately, through the command line interface. You're not just popping open a version of Windows. You're not using the Mac OS and their lovely, fantastic, interfaces to access our data. You're doing everything in command line, right? Why? Because this seems very counterintuitive to our modern day computer culture. Why is everything driven in the command line interface at the large studio scale? Anyone can access it from any computer, right? I like it. That's a good point. That's very much part of it.
I also know what a command line interface is, so I'm just guessing.
Okay, let's get everyone on the same page here. No, that's an honest question.
If I knew what it is, I might be able to pinpoint it better. But
see if there's any images. That is a command line interface. Okay.
so you type in whatever you
Bingo. Yeah, bingo. Okay. This is, on the back end of most animation studios, this is how we pull up all of our files, okay? We're not, obviously we're doing our artwork in Photoshop or in Animate, but when we save our project file and we need to retrieve it and open it up, we bring open a Linux or a Unix shell, and we start accessing those files and opening them through the command line interface, okay?
Also because it's more secure.
Definitely more secure, and most importantly, it's customizable, okay? In many large studios, the operating systems can be very limited, right? We have to play inside the rules of that specific operating system. By working inside the command line interface, we can extend our operating system and customize it for the work that we're doing inside that studio, right? If there's a bug or there's a cataclysmic problem that's stopping our work, this command line interface will allow the computer scientists and the programmers at that studio to fix the problem outside of the support mechanism of Apple or Microsoft. Okay. Yeah, and in a studio environment, you can't wait 2 or 3 weeks to get your answer to your question, right? You have to be able to solve that problem instantaneously. So most big studios choose to work inside of a Linux or a Unix environment because it gives them the flexibility and the extensibility that they need to do their business, okay? So in this environment, where there's no cool icons and there's no really fancy graphic user interface, the naming conventions for both our files and our folders become very, very, very important, okay? It's a good skill to practice, one that I highly, highly suggest that we all get very comfortable in. As we mentioned earlier, working on an animation is a team sport, right? You can't do this stuff by yourself, right? 172,000 individual drawings for Fantasia, okay? One person is not going to do that by themselves. So these naming conventions get us literally all in the same page, right? If we're all naming our files according to the convention, it gets a whole lot easier to find things, to work on things, and have the data that we create kind of flow cleanly through the production pipeline, okay? So this is the system that I use. I like it. After every underscore, we get a little bit more specific with what the purpose and the role of this file is inside the larger context of the system, okay? So everyone's last name, that's the most general, unique identifier for the projects that you create, right? And then, if you think about it like this, you're asking questions. Well, how is this, this file going to be used, all right? Well, this is my file, okay? I put my last name on it. It's being used in a GCOM class, okay? This is not an assignment for a biology class or a physics class. This is the GCOM class, right? And, well, which GCOM class? We have like 30 different GCOM classes, right? This is GCOM 400, okay? Well, which assignment in GCOM 400? Well, it's the Pendulum Swing, okay? It's a good little system. We go from the most general description to the most specific description as we possibly can in one file. Larger point being, you just can't name your files whatever you want, okay? Out there in the real world, you gotta adhere to the convention. And this is a skill that employers are looking for, so start practicing that today, okay? Yeah?
Just to say that 172,000 days ago would have been September 23rd, 1547. So if you did a picture a day,
It would take you 400 years, over 400 years to make it. That's, yeah, so we're not doing a picture a day, yeah?
Picture day.
That is an excellent little factoid. I love that. I'm gonna borrow that for my section on Thursday. If you do one drawing a day for an animation for Fantasia, it would take you 400 years. I like it. When you get into GCOM 401 or GCOM 402, we're going to be setting up conditions in which the computer is going to create an image for us, right? Seems easier, like sweet, the computer's going to draw the picture, awesome. It's not any easier. Actually, on a lot of regards, it's more difficult than just hand drawing it, right? So we talk about rendering and how long it takes for the computer to render and create these pictures for us. And if you take those classes, you'll hear me say this again. John Knoll, who is kind of the top dog in our world, right? He is the Chief Creative Officer at Industrial Light and Magic. He is the top of the pyramid when it comes to the visual effects side. There is just John. And he's a really cool dude. He's a really cool dude. And he's been a visual effects supervisor for many, 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 many years. And one of his credits, I think that the film that earned him an Academy Award was for all the visual effects in Pirates of the Caribbean 3, right? which is not a fantastic film, but the visual effects are stunning. And he definitely earned his Academy Award because they are, at the time, they were top shelf, right? And during the press for Pirates 3, he threw out this little factoid that I just absolutely love. He's like, if you take all of the rendered computer-generated elements that we created for Pirates of the Caribbean 3 and rendered it on one machine, right? Guess how long it would take to render every single asset?
13 years. About as
13.
long as if you painted Fantasia one picture a day.
Almost. It's actually longer. He calculated out that it would take about 1,000 years if one computer rendered everything for Pirates 3, right? So, yeah. Well, these are computer nerds, right? This is what they do for a living.
You have a lot of waiting time.
Because that's like
Yeah.
half a day.
Well, when you get to the big studio scale, everything is budgeted, right? You track very carefully how long you're rendering something and how long it takes for something to get rendered, because then you're billing the client for those hours. So that's a known quantity, how long it takes to render something. Comment, question? No, yeah. Luckily down at ILM, they don't have, one computer that they're rendering all their stuff on, right? Yeah, they have a render farm, and it's intense. I've seen pictures of the ILM render farm. Well, I can no longer say they just moved in, but their new facility is in the Presidio. Right basically, imagine the Golden Gate, okay? And at the foot of the Golden Gate is the Presidio, and it's a wonderful multi-billion-dollar facility, and it's beautiful. I've been down there a couple times, and their render farm is intense, right? It's super cold in there, right? They push they spend a lot of energy making sure their computers don't melt. But imagine a room. No, seriously, imagine the room about the size of a football field, okay? Humongous space full of server cabinets. Do you guys know what server cabinets look like? They're about 8 feet tall. They're about like here, right? And they, inside of one cabinet, there are, a whole bunch of computers that are basically this tall. They're called 1U blades. And each, imagine a computer like this, minimized down to something this thin, but really long. That's how at the commercial scale, that's what computers look like. And they could have 40 of these computers in one cabinet, right? And each one of those computers could have, 8, 10, 12 cores on it, right? So each computer is a pretty beefy machine. And they have an entire football field-sized room full of server cabinets.
It's basically just a motherboard, a video card, a bunch of RAM, a bunch of processors.
You got it. That's all you really need. When you're rendering thing, that's all you need. You don't need a fancy operating system, a monitor. You don't need all that stuff. You just need the raw silicon to do the job. All right, well, let's get back on track.
And a lot of cooling.
And a lot of air conditioning. Yeah. All right. So please make sure when you're submitting your files, follow the naming convention guidelines found at the bottom of each assignment sheet. Question, I'm sorry.
You said you only wanted the gift for this, right?
And maybe next time, we're going to advance onto a different way of exporting our animations from Animate. But for the first couple weeks, we're going to keep it pretty easy. And then once we're comfortable, we'll kind of graduate to the next level. Yep. All right. I am a GIF. It's not GIF. It's GIF. It's okay. All right. So when you're ready to go, you're going here. This is in the top right-hand corner of every assignment sheet. For all of my stuff, you're going to be submitting a file, right? Well, in our case, 2 files. Okay. So of course, you choose the file here, and then you do add another file when you need to, attach that second file onto your submission. Now, this is really important. You haven't done anything until you hit the gigantic blue button that says Submit Assignment. Okay? So don't forget to submit your assignment. Really, I know it seems kind of silly, but every semester I get folks saying, I turned my assignment in, right? And then upon investigation, I find out they attached everything, but they didn't hit the gigantic button that says Submit Assignment. So please make sure you finish the job by hitting Submit Assignment. Please don't add a comment. You don't need to add, you don't need to tell me, like, you guys are very kind and very respectful, and I appreciate that. But you don't need to thank me for a wonderful experience and tell me that I hope you're having a nice day and please grade my assignment very very nicely. You don't need to do that. Okay, just submit it. Boom, attach, submit. You're done. Okay, I don't need. I don't need all that. Yeah. No, or maybe ever. So, and then, once it's submitted, you'll be able to go in and into Canvas and see that the submission was received, okay? You can also re-download the files that you submit into Canvas, so if you lose them, it's always on Canvas, okay? You'll always have access to what you submitted on Canvas as long as this course is open, which I think this course is open on the back end through January, or through December. And I think January 1 is when they turn off all the course shells. So keep that in mind. All right. Questions on how to submit your work. You're going to be doing this for every single assignment going forward. All right, rock and roll. Let's jump over and start having some fun. Because as you can see, we have some work in here that we need to do. Our goal this week is to create a simple little pendulum swing. Now, we're going to be doing all of our animation in here in a really great program called Adobe Animate. And I think you're going to like it. As I mentioned last week, it's a good animation application. It's not a great animation application. It's a good animation application. Well, there's a couple reasons why. After Effects doesn't do a really great job at hand-drawn animations. There is a brush system inside of After Effects, but it's really not meant for our production pipeline. Animate does a really solid job of recreating the old school 2D animation production pipeline. Okay, there are other apps out there that do a far better job at this system. Toon Boom is such a really great example of this. If you are really into 2D animation, jump into Toon Boom. It's a great application. I think you're going to find that it's a wonderful experience. We use Animate because it's part of the Adobe suite. It makes it very easy to support. It's very accessible. Toon Boom can be quite expensive for us to support here on campus, so we choose not to do that. And we only do one class in the 2D world, so we're not going to make a very large investment in a piece of software that's only going to be used a couple weeks out of the year, right? So Animate's going to be our home away from home. Yes, sir. They absolutely do, and I can't speak highly enough of it. I definitely would suggest that you get into it if you're really going down that track. In the larger scheme of things, and I like to remind people of this, we're not a 2D animation program. This is only one little facet of a much larger perspective, right? We're a 3D art program. So these fundamental principles are really super important, which is why we spend some time looking at them. But at the end of the day, we're not training you to be 2D artists. We're training you to be 3D artists. So that's why we don't put a lot of emphasis on Toon Boom. It is Flash. Yeah. Adobe kind of rebranded Flash as Animate, and they've made some improvements and some good improvements. And I think you're going to like hanging out in this space. Okay, so let's jump over and take a look at it real fast. You can find Animate down in your dock at the bottom of the screen. Now, if your dock is hidden, put your mouse cursor all the way down to the bottom, and it will pop up. Okay, if you launch Animate, check it out. It's pretty cool. You don't have to sync your settings. Adobe's trying to have this whole cloud library thing where they're trying to make all of your user preferences accessible across every single device that you sign into. I would really, really recommend in this environment, do not sign into your own personal Adobe CC cloud settings, right? It will create some problems going forward because people don't often sign out. And it's just, I don't want anything to happen to your own stuff. Okay, we provide you to a license and access to Adobe Animate in many places here on campus. Of course, naturally you have it in here. When you go down later in the week and finish your lab, you'll find it down in the design lab as well. All right, so welcome to Adobe Animate. Okay, do you guys have some experience working in Photoshop or any of the other Adobe apps? Okay, cool. Yeah, okay. So if you have some experience working in some of the other Adobe apps, certainly go out and make sure you help your neighbors. Okay, there's some newbies in here. But one of the things that we need to do initially on any image editing and image creation application is to initially create our workspace. Okay, that's the first thing that we got to do. For us here in Animate, this is called a stage. Okay, and we need to physically define the dimensions of our stage, how big it is. Okay, and we do that very simply by going to the top of the screen under File and then New. Okay. Now you're going to get this little wizard that pops up. This is exactly where we want to hang out. Okay. Here's my suggestion. Memorize some numbers, but if you don't feel like memorizing it, there's some lovely templates that we're going to use going forward. Okay. we have to play with inside some very defined rules, if you will, in the animation, in the cinema industry. This is not like, fine art, where we can just make our image any size we want, at any frame rate, and do whatever the hell we want to do. That's not us. We actually have a governing body that determines and comes up with specifications that we need to follow. It's called SMPTE. And it's the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers. They come up with the broadcast specifications for all of our delivery formats. Okay? So we need to play with inside of that bounding box, those set of rules. And the guys and gals down at Adobe have done us a solid. And I really do mean this is fantastic. I'm quite thankful that they've given us some really great templates. Okay, so if you go into the templates section, where we are going in here is the media playback category. Now, once you load in the media playback category, specifically, we're going to start off with Title Safe Area HD TV 720. And what this is going to do is that it's going to create a stage for us that follows some very specific image resolutions. And let's hit OK and take a look at it. There it is. Okay, dun, da, da, da. This is our stage. What we've done is we've created a creation environment that follows the HD broadcast specification. If you look over here in your properties panel, you'll start to expose and understand specifically the resolution that this template's given us. Okay. I'm going to zoom into the properties section. 1280 by 720. All right, rock and roll. Now we're into HD. Okay. This is not the largest flavor of HD. This is actually the smallest flavor of HD, but it gets us going in the right direction. Specifically, it makes a nice rectangular image that we can use for our work.
Above it says FPS is almost at 30.
Great, great question. And that was the next step in this. Because in the cinema world, what frame rate do we want? 24. Okay. The only really bad thing about this template is that it changes the frame rate from the cinema space over into the broadcast television space. Okay. Television, they broadcast at a frame rate of 2997. Okay. So we need to change this. And luckily, just clicking on the little yellow link, 24, boom, now we're done. Okay? This is the first thing I do whenever I start a new project file, is double check my screen settings, okay, my size and my width, make sure this is 1280 by 720, and then also change it from 2997 to 24 frames a second. All right. Since I'm a super nerd, the next thing that I do is I save my project. Okay? Save early on. I can't even spell my own name today. I want to put my file on the desktop. Now, I recommend that when you're working here in this lab, that you save everything to the desktop. It makes it really, 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 really easy to find and manage, to put it on thumb drives or to upload it to Google. Okay? If you're putting it in like the downloads, the document folders, it just makes it, a couple extra clicks to get to your data. Okay. I use my desktop as kind of like a painter's palette. I got all my paint, okay, all my things that I'm going to play with and use to create my artwork all in one spot. And then at the end of the day, I kind of shift them all over to their final resting places when I'm ready to go. All right. Let's jump back over to Animate and start taking a look at this work environment, because there's some quirks in here. Like I said, it's a good animation application. It's not fantastic. It's definitely not the worst, definitely not the best. It's just kind of middle of the road, and it's going to do what we need it to do quite well, I think. Okay. All of the examples that you saw at the beginning of class last week, those were all animations that were created using this very software. So it is a very capable animation program, and I hope that you like working in it. There are a couple different places in the interface that I want to draw your attention to. Okay. First and foremost, this is it. This is our stage. This is our viewport into our actual playground, if you will. So the stage, the center part of our interface, is where we're going to be doing the lion's share of our work. This is where we're going to be drawing, manipulating our objects. So this center stage is really, really important. So get used to looking here. This is a what you see is what you get environment. There's no rendering, there's no post-processing. If it shows up on the stage, that's what your animation is going to look like. Okay? There is no magic behind it, which simplifies everything down and kind of distills it, which I think is really nice. Okay? So what you see is what you get. Now, immediately down below, This is the second most important area for us. This is the timeline, okay? This timeline represents every single frame that's currently been created and is being used for our animation. I think if you have a little bit of experience in other applications, like maybe you've done some video editing before, or you've worked in After Effects or other 3D modeling packages that have an animation timeline, it's important to note that our timeline here in Animate is fundamentally different, okay? We don't have an infinite timeline, okay? Our animation is only as long as the drawings that are on it, okay? So it's difficult to see. And if the guys at Adobe are listening to my live stream, maybe they should fix this because I hate their colors. These little gray bars down here, let me zoom in so you can see it. Those gray bars determine the drawings that are currently being used inside of our timeline, okay? It's a layered-based timeline, just like we have over in Photoshop. So whatever's on top is going to block and occlude whatever's on the bottom, okay? We have on every project file that we create using this media template, you're going to get these two layers, the title action safe, okay? Those are those guides that you see in the center of your stage, and then the content layer, which is just a raw layer that we can use to put our drawings on, okay? What I like to do when I'm first getting out here is I like to turn off the visibility of my title action safe layer. See that? Click on the little eyeball, it turns it on and off, okay? We'll talk about the role of the title and action safe when we get a little bit of experience in a couple weeks. There is a very specific role to it, okay? And now, down here, I want to see if I can do something here to make it easier for you guys to see. Okay. So down here in our timeline, we get a really good representation of the content of our animation, of our timeline. Now look very, very carefully. So here's the title action safe layer. You can delete this if you'd like. It really doesn't have a large impact on what we're doing this week. But our content layer, okay? Now look at the difference. These little rectangular cubes here are the icons that we're going to use to determine the drawings and what type of drawings that we're going to have in our animation. Now what is the big difference between these different cubes? The color, okay? And this is one of the reasons why I really, really, really hate the Adobe Animate timeline, is because everything is gray, and it's difficult at the beginning to differentiate between a frame that has content and a frame that's empty. And I think that's the important takeaway here. We have frames that are empty and frames that have some strokes in them, okay, where our artwork resides. In my imagination, what these frames are drawings, okay? I try to get everything down to its simple moving parts and pieces, and you can't get any simpler than just a single drawing. On this layer, notice how the cube, on the title action safe layer, notice how the cube is kind of a light gray and its circle is filled in, right? That's telling us that on this frame, on frame number 1, on this layer, we have a drawing, okay? On the content layer on frame number 1, because it's a dark gray cube with an unfilled circle, there's an empty frame there. It's empty. It doesn't have any sort of drawing on it, okay? It doesn't have a circle or a square. It's empty. Just a white background, okay? Well, let's change that for a second. Let's put some content, let's put some drawings, some keystroke, or some brush strokes on our content layer and get rocking and rolling and start to fill this frame with our drawing. Okay, so let's do it real fast. It's super easy, which brings us over to our toolbar over here on the right-hand side of our screen. All of these are all of our tools that we have access to here at Adobe Animate, and there are a bunch of them, and I think I'm in a square mood today. So I'm going to fire off the rectangle tool, and let's do this. I'm going to make, so when you fire off any of your tools, okay, especially your shape creation tools, the properties panels are going to show you properties that are directly associated with that tool. And I'm going to change the color. So the fill color, I want the inside color of my square to be, oh, I don't know, let's pick a lovely shade of red. Why not? I like red. And now I'm going to draw on my canvas. Now I'm going to go back in time and hit undo just for 1 second so you guys can see the difference between the little gray markers on our timeline. Here it is before. Notice that the gray marker for the frame indicator, the content layer, is dark gray. What does dark gray represent? Empty. It's empty. There's nothing on that frame. Now, if I put the square in, oops, it's not letting me do redo, so let me just draw it again. Bloop. Okay. See how that square went from dark gray to light gray, and the circle went from unfilled to filled? Now we have content on that frame. Okay. Right now, how many frames is my animation? Just one, right? If I was at the play button, nothing would happen. Okay. So let's add an additional frame in there and start looking at how this crazy animation system works. Now keep in mind, these are drawings. Every frame in our animation is a drawing of our animation. For giggles, just for kind of our first day exercise, I'm going to have an animation that goes from this side of my screen. Wait for it. Where's it going to go? Right over there. That's all I'm going to do. I'm simply just going to translate my cube from the left to the right. So I'm going to create a new frame. Okay? And I apologize, it's dark in here, and we don't have a lot of whiteboard real estate, but there are a couple keyboard shortcuts that you're going to commit to memory here very soon. Okay? And I'm going to write them down. I guess over here is the only spot that I can do it. I'm working on getting a big whiteboard so I can, have you guys see the things that I write. So there's a couple keyboard shortcuts that I need you guys to see and understand. It's the function key, so F5. Okay? F5, and we're also going to explore F6 and F7. Okay? F5, F6, and F7 on the top row of our keyboards have an important role inside of the creation of the many types of different frames we have access to in our Animate timeline. Now, I like using the keyboard shortcuts. I'm a big fan of using the F5 and F6 buttons on my keyboard. However, the powers that be at Apple decided to reprogram the function keys to do like mute, volume level up, advance, iTunes forward and backwards. So we need to restore the function of our function keys to the original state. So here's how we do it. And this is something that you're going to need to do on every computer that you're going to be working on here at SCC. Okay? And let me show you how to get access to the function keys. Because right now, F5, F6, well, mine's already done it. But let's do it for you guys. So if we go into our system preferences, okay, and then specifically, naturally, we're going to go into our keyboard section of our system preferences. Down at the bottom of this pane here, it says use F12, blah, 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 as standard function keys. This is what we're after, okay? This option right there. Boop. Okay. Now, for example, F7 is not going to be play previous track. F7 is going to be function 7. It's going to allow us to create an empty keyframe, or an empty frame, excuse me. So we definitely want to make sure we turn this on. And you'll need to do this in the computers over in the design lab if you're working over there and using these keyboard shortcuts. Okay. All right. With that in tow, let's return back to Animate and continue making our little cube. And I'm just going to ensure that my cube tool is on before I go too much further. All right. So as I mentioned before, on frame 1, this is what my drawing looks like. Okay. Now I want to make a new drawing, a new frame that gets my cube. I want to see if I can get it just a little bit bigger. There we go. I want my cube to land over here. So now I need to physically create a new drawing, and this is where the function keys come in, F5, F6, and F7. Yeah?
When it's not filling in, I'm not sure why.
Okay.
Yeah. I thought it would have filled in already.
Let's see. Yeah. Okay, let's grab the direct selection tool, the arrow. You just click on your cube for a second. Okay. This is interesting to me. Now, I'm thinking, yeah, so here's why it's not working. For whatever reason, it currently sees the fill properties of this entire shape as no fill.
Okay.
So we're just seeing the outline. If you were to select all 4 edges of that square, yeah, let's try changing the fill properties now. Even though it's red, let's make sure it's red. Nada, nothing, huh? Okay, well, this is a fun one.
Right now.
You know, there is a view property. If I remember correctly, this is something that I never do. But if you go to the top of the screen under the View pull-down menu, go into Preview mode. Are you on Outlines?
Yeah, it should be, right.
Okay, perfect. You're like me. I don't know. Try making a different shape with a different tool. See if you get the same result.
Okay.
Okay. Not a deal breaker for what we're doing, but we can figure that out here in a minute when I let you guys kind of off the races and let you guys explore. All right. Let's keep cruising here for a second. Alrighty, rights. So let's talk about the purpose behind all of these function keys, F5, F6, and F7. Now let's start with F5, because each one of these keys has a very defined role inside of our animation sequence. So notice that this big red thing, does anyone know what this thing is called, this red line? It's not the timeline. This entire thing is our timeline, right? But what's this red line called? Does anyone know? This is called our playhead, okay, or our current time indicator. Whatever frame that this red line is currently sitting on represents the frame we are viewing. Remember, this is a what you see is what you get environment. If I wanted to see the content on frame 20, I would need to have a frame there, and I'd also need to advance my playhead to frame 20 to see that specific drawing, okay? Right now, we only have one frame inside of our entire animation, so let's add a second one, okay? I have my content layer selected, so whatever I do is only going to influence that specific layer. Now, let's see what happens when I hit the F5 key. Well, I didn't have, I'm sorry. I'm going to select the frame. I forgot to select it, and then hit F5. Yeah, it creates another frame. Okay. Now, if we advance our playhead to frame 2 here, simply just by clicking on that frame, visually, what can you tell me about both of these frames? Both of these drawings? They're the same. So when we hit the F5 key, really what we're doing is duplicating that drawing, and we're holding it for an additional frame. Okay? So the F5 key is going to duplicate. Okay? It's going to duplicate the frame. Okay? I'm going to go back in time for a second and get rid of that duplicate frame. There we go. Okay. I'm going to select that frame again, and now I'm going to hit the F6 key. The F6 key is going to do something different. The F6 key is still going to duplicate it, but now, if you look very carefully, and I did this intentionally so you guys have a comparison point, okay? Look at how the timeline is drawing the content on title action safe. We have another frame because it's light gray and it's got the little white rectangle in it. We're duplicating, we're holding that drawing. When we hold a drawing, it's not an individual drawing. It's not a separate drawing. I can't go in and change it. Well, actually, I can. I can convert it. But we're holding a drawing. It's as if we're taking two exposures, 2 pictures of that drawing. Okay. Now downstairs, how is this one different? Frame 2 on my content layer. Yeah, this is a key frame. That little white, or excuse me, that little dark dot represents a key frame. Okay, an independent drawing that can be made separate and unique from all the other drawings in our timeline. Okay. Now I have my cursor on drawing number 2 here, so I can actually grab my square if I wanted to. Use the direct selection tool and just drag it out. Put it over there. Okay. Now I've moved my cube from the left to the right. Did I delete that other drawing? No. If I wanted to go back and see that other drawing, what do? Just click on it again. Remember, what you see is what you get. What you click on in the timeline determines what shows up in here inside the viewer. So if I wanted to see the other drawing on frame 1, I'm just going to click on it. Here, I'll make this a little bit more obvious by changing the color of my cube. Because when everything is the same color, sometimes it's difficult to kind of separate things out. Good animation, right? Someone has already found the gigantic play button downstairs. You looped it. Yeah, let's see. Here's loop. Yeah. Awesome animation.
Oh my god.
I think I'm going to go into epileptic shock now, so I'll stop that, right? Okay. I'm going to go back to the first drawing, and I really want to show you how independent these are from each other, okay? Because this is what's cool about the entire Animate system, is that we are physically making drawings, and what we do on one drawing doesn't necessarily influence the other drawing. If they're separate like this, if they're independent drawings, as they are here, so their own light gray rectangle with a dark dot on them, I can make a change to one and not have it affect anything that comes after it. Now I've gone back to frame number uno here, number 1, okay, and I'm going to change its fill color to kind of prove this point. So I'm going to select my square again. Let's change the fill color to blue. Why not? So now I have a blue square. If I go forward in time, 1 frame, bloop, it both on this drawing, I moved the cube and it's a different color. Okay? So when we have a black circle, when we have a key frame, they're independent from each other. They're not linked, they're not referenced. Yes, sir?
So how come, like, sometimes the thing is dotted, sometimes it's not?
That has every, it's directed to how we create the shape. Everything to do with how we create the shape. And we'll get to that here in a minute.
Okay.
Okay? So just hang tight. All right. So I want to make this drawing, or my animation, a little bit longer, okay? Because clearly I don't want it to be that. All right, that's pretty fast. So we're going to need some more frames in here. But before we really jump into adding more frames and start fleshing out a little bit more of a complete animation, here's what I would like you guys to do just for maybe 10 minutes or so. Is just get comfortable creating shapes and making strokes inside of the Animate drawing engine. Now, we're lucky in the sense that we have some really great tools. I just want you to explore this for a second. You can find most of all your shape creation tools down here, okay? As I mentioned before, we have an OK drawing engine inside of Animate. We have a really great animation playback engine, which is why I've chosen Animate versus other. Animating in Photoshop is horrible, okay? Yeah. Drawing in Photoshop is the best, right? It's got the best drawing engine. Drawing in Animate, it's not so hot, right? So it's a give and a take. It's a give and a take, right? But here's what I want you to do. I want you to start to learn and understand the differences between the different applications, okay? Because there are how our drawing tools in Animate work is very differently than how they work over inside of Photoshop. So just explore them for a second. Get a whole bunch of really great shape creation tools. We also have the pencil tool, which I find kind of pointless, but it is there, okay? There's also a really good vector brush tool, okay? The vector brush tool is a little strange because let's increase the stroke a little bit. It gets, see how it's thrown down, little dots. This is vector, so it's going to try to give us a path, okay, just like Adobe Illustrator would. I then can go back in and select that path, and I can even go in, I think with my sub-selection tool, yeah, make changes to it. This is really important for us later on, okay? And then finally is just the regular rasterized brush tool, okay? I'll make my size quite big here. The third one is just regular rasterized brushes, okay? Now everyone just play around with the brush system just for a couple minutes. Just draw something. Doesn't matter what. Get comfortable working inside this space just for 5 minutes or so, because it is a little bit different, and I want you guys to have an opportunity to get comfortable with how we're going to work. Okay, so now that we have just a little bit more experience of working with inside of the drawing engine and Animate, let's talk about some of the pitfalls that we are absolutely going to fall into. These are landmines that every one of us probably has stepped on so far. And I went ahead and just made a very simple illustration while you guys are working. Can't get more simple than a square, a red square, and a green circle, right? Now, look how I drew these two things together. I drew the red square first, and then I drew the green circle on top of it. Now, if I go over and grab my direct selection tool, dark arrow, and I select, let's just select the circle. Over in Photoshop, what would you expect to see when I move the circle?
Everything moves.
Potentially. I would expect to see that bottom right-hand corner of that square, right? But that's not the case here in Animate. Check it out. Okay? Yeah, and on that note, I can actually put it back on top of the red square. Well, it's not going to do it now, but when you, maybe they click off it, you can like nip, there it is. I didn't click off of it. You can nibble away at that drawing. So I got click off it, then I move it again, taking a part of that red square away.
Well, I guess it like helps with, like maybe rendering things.
Could be. Could be. But if you want the most flexibility, there's one little option that we have to turn off. And luckily for us, it's really easy. And this is a global system. The system influences every single one of our shape creation tools. Some of you guys were running into this problems when you were just using the brush tool and stroking, right? And then you go back in and maybe start to adjust your brush stroke and like, oh, now I've damaged things, right? I physically erased things. It's not like Photoshop on the surface at the moment. However, and let's do this. I'm just going to select both of these, get rid of them. Okay, I'm going to redraw this entire example. But this time, I'm going to turn a very special property on. It's called Object Drawing Mode, and it's this one right here. Object Drawing Mode. See how it's currently off? Now watch what happens to the behavior of Animate when I enable it. Okay, I'm going to turn Object Drawing Mode on. And once again, I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'll find a nice lovely shade of red. I'll draw a red square, and then a green circle. Okay, nearly identical to what we had before. However, this time, when I grab the direct selection tool, ta-da! Okay, there's separate elements inside of my canvas. They're all unique from each other. So it doesn't matter where I put things. I can always grab it and move it out of the way. This is really important. Remember, this object drawing system is going to influence how the image is rasterized. Okay? On one hand, Animate tries to make it simple, but if you're not aware of this one silly little minefield, okay, it's going to blow up in your face. All right. So point being, be very careful with this. In addition, one of the benefits that we get, and I'm going to simply delete that cube. I'm going to draw another circle. Notice that I turned off Object Drawing Mode just to give us a comparison point. Okay, so I got two green circles now. So this is the regular one. Look how it's being filled in. I know it's kind of hard to see. It's a little bit easier on your own local screen. But see how it's got that kind of dotted pattern on the inside? Okay? This is what a shape looks like when I've created it with Object Drawing Mode off. It recognizes it as a rasterized shape, okay? Pixels. However, when Object Drawing Mode is on, look how it analyzes the properties, okay? Now it sees it as a vector shape, and we get this lovely path that is then filled in. What's cool about this, and why I bring this to your attention, is that if I was to go into the white arrow, the sub-selection direction, or sub-selection tool, I now can go in and grab individual control points and make edits, okay? And this is pretty neat. It's very, very, very intuitive, but it's a big difference between the two, okay? In a couple weeks, we're going to be doing a bouncing ball exercise, and believe it or not, it's going to start with a simple shape like a sphere, and then we're going to transform and squish and deform that shape into a whole series of really cool, fun forms. Having Object Drawing Mode on and allowing giving us access to all these control points along our path is going to help us create some very organic shapes quickly. Okay. Does that make sense? So be aware of object drawing mode. It will influence what you're able to do going forward with the painting tools inside of Animate. All right.
When should that option pop up? Is it only I think you click on the pen tool to make that pop up before, or was that wrong?
The object drawing mode?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in every one of our tools, right? It's right here.
Okay.
See how it's kind of almost always up here at the top. I think it's even in, yeah. It really doesn't move from this part of our properties panel. Doesn't matter which tool I'm in, it's always there. And I think there's also a global shortcut down at the bottom. Yeah, here's the global shortcut down at the bottom for our in our toolbar.
So if you start drawing in non-object drawing mode and then switch, then you're going to have both combination of rasterized and
And vector shapes in one canvas, yeah. Yeah, and you can't convert a rasterized image into a vector shape after the fact, unfortunately. Okay. All right.
Do you have a suggestion of what we'll be working in on a regular basis? I know there might be certain circumstances, but
I almost always leave object drawing mode on. It gives me the most flexibility, and it just kind of, it makes life a little bit easier because I'm an edit guy. I like to draw something and then go back in and tweak it a little bit. So being able to have access to all of my vector shapes and vector paths is really kind of attractive to me. So yeah, but figure out, there's no wrong way of doing this. So
when I asked you that question before about when you were drawing individual boxes, then each of those boxes for standard settings when you start up the software, will they be separate boxes in object drawing mode on?
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So if you
merge them probably, like you can.
yeah, you can group them if you want. If you want to, and simply, you know, if you want to manipulate all the boxes simultaneously, just draw out a selection box that includes all those boxes, move them together as a unit. Yeah. All right. So I have this frame of animation here on frame 4 that I really don't want. Okay. I want to get rid of this thing. It's no longer necessary. The easiest way to do it is you can just right-click on it, and you can cut the frames. Okay. Bloop. See how it's gone? Now, what is that? I want to move my playhead. So on frame 4, what does that dark rectangle icon mean? No content, right? It's almost like an empty container. It's as if we're saying, I could put something here if I wanted to in the future, but right now it's empty. It doesn't have any sort of drawing, on it at all. Okay. Now, if I wanted to delete that actual container, okay, it gets a little bit more difficult. And I'm happy that they do this because you don't want to accidentally delete your frames, okay, your containers, your drawings. And I think, what is it, under the Edit pull-down menu? I always forget because it's a little different. There is a remove frame in here, and I always forget where it is. But you can remove it. Yeah.
Is there a shortcut for the play key?
I think it's the space bar. I think so. I'm not like a huge keyboard shortcut dude, but check it out. So I apologize. It is, I went to the wrong, we have two different timeline panels here, which is frustrating. It's under the Edit pull-down menu, Timeline, and then Remove Frames. That will permanently make that frame just go away. Bye-bye. Okay? Oops. So I got the frame selected, Timeline, Remove Frames, and it's gone. Okay, it's gone. The keyboard shortcut for that was Shift F5. Okay, so I want to remove this frame as well. So we can go back to animating a little bit here. So Shift F5 will permanently remove that drawing from my timeline. Okay? All right. So here's what I got. Shoot, I'm just going to get rid of this entire thing. Trash it. There we go. So here's what I got. I got these two drawings. If you go back to the example that I was creating before. Blue cube, red cube, blue cube, red cube. Okay? And I was just using the period and comma keys to advance my playhead forward and backwards. Okay? But I want my animation to be a little bit longer. Okay? I want my animation to be a little bit more smooth. I want my animation to start over here, and let's pretend just for today's purposes only, I want to move that red cube over to the right a little bit to give me some more room inside of my canvas to do the work that I'm after. All right, there we go. So this is where I want my animation to begin and where I want my animation to end. Okay? What we've done here is that we've created keyframes. And we're going to talk a lot about keyframes over the next 16 weeks. Keyframes for us in the animation world are extreme poses. They're the storytelling moments. Think of it like this. A keyframe are the drawings that our audience absolutely needs to see in order to understand the movement, right? Comic book artists are masters at establishing those key frames, those storytelling frames, right? Think about it. In a comic book, you have these wonderful narratives and these huge action sequences, and they're all distilled down into maybe a couple panels. And from those couple panels, you understand the movements, you understand the story and the dialogue, right? They're masters at it. It takes a lot of experience to understand what you need and what you don't need. Those key frames are where the story is actually told. Everything else basically transitions between the keyframes. Honestly, those in-between frames are called the in-betweens. Okay? We put all of our energy on the key frames, and we time out our keyframes first. Okay? So in every sense, what we're going over right now is the basic underpinnings of our animation sequence. I've established the two storytelling moments in my animation. The cube's on the left on frame 1, or drawing 1. The cube's on the right on drawing 2. Now, how long do I want my animation to be? I don't want it to be 2 frames. Maybe I want this entire animation to happen over the course of a second. It's a good start. It's not going very far, so maybe we'll do 12 frames, a half a second. Okay? So I need to have 12 frames down here. Okay? Let's do it real fast. And this is where it gets kind of fun and a little bit more fluid. So I'm going to duplicate this frame here. Okay? This process is called timing. We're trying to explore and figure out how fast and how slow we want this animation to take. I want to grab that first drawing, and I'm simply going to hit the F5 key. And as I hit the F5 key, notice that it's pushing that second drawing over to the right. Okay? So I'm going to keep pushing it until it gets to, here's frame 10, 11, 12. There it is. If I play my animation now by hitting the play button, boop, boop. Okay, that's what I got. There's a lot of pretending in animation, believe it or not. It's kind of strange to say that out loud, but there is. There's a lot of projection. In my mind, what I'm doing is that I'm pretending that my animation starts at this drawing, then over the next 11 frames, it's moving and maybe changing color, then ending up over there on the right. Okay? This gives me a chance to explore how fast and how slow I want my animation to take. Let's play it again. Boop. Yeah. That feels about right. So I've established the keyframes. I've established the timing of the keyframes. Now we get to go through the labor of making all the in-betweens, because clearly I just don't want it to click in over there on the right. I want to see a nice kind of smooth movement. Okay? This is where it gets kind of fun. Let's do it real fast. Okay. So I'm going to go to frame 2, and I'm going to start changing this drawing, because we're holding this drawing for 11 frames, and then we're going to the red one. Okay? I want to change frame 2 from a hold drawing into its own unique drawings. Okay? And that's where F6 comes in. Okay? Now, if I go back in time, I've selected frame 2. Okay? I hit F6. It converts it into its own independent, unique drawing now. I can do whatever I want to this drawing, and it's not going to influence what's happened on frame 1. Let's do it. Because now, perhaps I want my cube to be a little bit further forward. Okay, so that's the movement it's traveling. Let's do it again. I'm going to go with frame 3. What keyboard shortcut allows me to change from a hold keyframe to an independent keyframe? F6. You got it. Bloop. Okay. And now I'm free to change the content here. I'm going to move this one a little bit further. So if we flip through, you can see that now the cube is starting to move. Let's do it again. F6. Here it is again. Usually what I do. And you can do all these at once by selecting the first keyframe, holding down the shift key, grabbing the next one. I want all these to be unique, independent keyframes, right? So I can do them all together at once by hitting F6. Okay.
They kind of look like keys.
Yeah, keyframes, absolutely. Let's just kind of revisit here. So there, and now. Now, it would be great. It'd be really great. I'm trying to figure out how far I need to go to move my block, right? As I advance through this, you can see that it's moving, and then that one goes back in time. That's because I haven't edited its location. But in order to place this cube where I want it to be, it'd be fantastic to get a really good, solid understanding of the locations of the drawings on the other frames, right? Where is the cube on frame 6? I don't know, because I'm only seeing the contents of frame 7. Well, this visibility of the previous frames, it's called onion skinning. And it's a great timeline option that you'll absolutely want to take advantage of. It's down here, the bottom of our timeline. It's, oops, get out of here, Doc. It's that guy right there, onion skinning. This is pretty great. You have two options. You can onion skin the entire animation, or you can just give us the outlines of all the animated frames. Let's turn on onion skinning. Ah, all right. So this little bar above our timeline shows us the range of frames that we're currently onion skinning. Okay, so if I put it all the way over there, frame 1, frame 12, yeah, now we're seeing the location of all of my cubes across the timeline. Okay, the one that's green is the current frame. The ones that are light blue are the previous frames. So I'll get a really good understanding of where I need to move this thing on frame 7. Maybe right about in there. Now I'm just going, now that I have an understanding of the target, there it is. Let's turn onion skinning off. It's really only something you want to do when you're laying out all this jazz. Let's play it. So I got some work in there I got to do. It gets kind of choppy in the center. The point being, bloop, it's working. It's animating. If I loop my animation, oops, there it is. Voila, we've done it. Everyone do this real fast. Everyone get just a simple little animation. And I mean simple. Make a cube or a sphere or a doohickey, whatever you want, just to move from one side of the screen to another side of the screen. I don't want you to leave here today without at least a tertiary kind of understanding of how this process works. Okay? Everyone got it? Let's just, and if you have a question, you run into a problem, raise your hand. I'm here to help. Let's just work for 5 or so minutes, and then we'll go on to the next thing. All right, so has everyone got something animating? Gotten it to move a little bit? Okay. If you're having some problems with this, definitely make sure you go back in, reference the live stream. You'll be able to literally see and hear me walk you through this entire sequence again. Okay, so it's a good resource to get some a small little refresher. Okay. All right. So we've made a little animation. It's award-winning, right? You know, I should submit this to the Academy. I'm sure I'm going to win an Oscar for my little work here, right? But I now need to get it out of Animate and into a file format that I now can share, right? Because right now our animation only exists inside of Animate. I need to get it out of Animate so I can submit it to Canvas at the very least, okay? Or, you know, you definitely want to make sure you put this on Facebook tonight, right? Because your family and your friends, they're going to want to see this, right? Because this is pretty fantastic. No, I'm joking. But well, you're more than welcome to. I'm not going to say no, right? But let's get it out of Animate and into a format that we can commonly exchange and share with anyone online. And for this week, just to keep it really basic, because I don't want to overload you on week 1, okay? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to the top of the screen where it says File, Export, and then Animated Gif, okay? This is not the best way, and this is not the only way that we're going to be doing this entire semester, so hang with me, okay? For week 1, this is a good way to get it out. It's a great way to test to see if your animation is working, okay? So we export out an animated GIF, okay? You're going to bring up the export dialog box. It is a big dialog box, okay? There's a lot of stuff going on, and there's a couple options in here that I would absolutely recommend that you enable. First and foremost, the thing that I suggest that you turn on or turn off, excuse me, is transparency. This is defaulted to on, okay? Turn your transparency off. That way, you have a white background, okay? This really now turns into what you see on the stage is what gets exported out of Animate, okay? Now, on top of that, there's really not a whole lot more else to do. You can give a small little preview. You can determine the looping behavior of your animation. So if you want it to loop forever, just keep that as is. If you want it just to play once and stop, you know, you have the once option. You can actually play your animation here, see if it's working the way you want it to work. And then, of course, naturally, hitting the gigantic save button in the lower right-hand corner will allow you to give it a name and a good location. I'm just going to put it on the desktop and hit save. Now, one of the cool things about working with GIFs, especially here on the Mac, is that the Mac OS fundamentally understands what a GIF is, okay? I like that about Apple. They don't live with their head in the sand. They understand image formats. Here's a great, simple way of looking at your exported file. Now, here's mine. This is what I created. If you were to simply just tap the space bar, which is going to open Quick Preview on the Mac, there it is. Pretty cool. Makes it simple. You don't have to load it into like a browser or anything. Just hit the space bar. It will play it. It's a great, simple way to test to see if your GIF is actually working. Okay? All right. So in essence, I now have created, we've gone through the entire cycle for turning in a homework assignment. When you're done with your homework in your lab this week, you're going to be submitting these 2 files, okay? 2 files for your homework, another 2 files for your lab assignment, okay? No need to zip them up. Actually, it's a whole lot easier for me if you don't zip them up, okay? Yeah, so it saves me about 3 extra steps, and I really appreciate not having to do those 3 extra steps. Just submit, attach each of these individually to your submission, you're on your way, okay? As a reminder, over in Canvas, you can attach multiple documents to one submission, so you don't need to submit things 8 times, okay? So I've already hit the submit button, so let me choose a file. It's on my desktop. I want that one. And now I'm going to add another file. I'll add in the GIF. Okay? You don't need to put a comment. I'm just being silly. Okay. I'm joking. You can put what not necessary. Just being silly. Okay, and then of course hit the big gigantic submit button when you're done. All right? All right. So that's what it's like working inside of Animate. It's pretty simple, okay? If you keep it simple in your mind, in that what we are creating here are just simply drawings. Each drawing is separate and independent from the rest. It gets easy. It gets a whole lot easier, okay? So for this week, we have 2 assignments that we're gonna strive to accomplish, okay? One, and let's go back to the week 1 module. One is called screen direction. This is your opportunity to make something a little bit more complex, okay? But the animation pipeline is really what we're drawing focus to. And in every sense, if you've been following along in class, you've kind of done the warm-up act to our lab assignment this week, which is called screen direction, okay? The goal for this assignment is to simply have an object go from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen and then back again, okay? There are some specifics in here that I want to make sure that you include, okay? Whenever I put something in bold, it's really important, okay? Oh, I'm sorry. This is a typo. I want to fix this. This should say GIF, okay? But 24 frames, that's your playground. So your thing is supposed to go from the left side to the right side and the back again in the course of 24 frames. You got to figure out how it looks. I'm not going to tell you how to do this assignment, okay? You need to include a background that does not move, so a static piece of artwork. I would really, really, really recommend that static piece of artwork put it on its own separate layer. That way you can, control it a little bit more directly, okay? Please use the 1280 by 720 pixel resolution. The template that we began with today is perfect, okay? And of course, you're going to be exporting out a GIF. In about 30 seconds, I'll change that to GIF. That's a mistake on my part. I apologize, okay? I've given you a really great example of what we're going for here. This is a process assignment, so we're not trying to create the most amazing piece of animation on the face of the planet. That will come next week, right? This week is just all about making it work and understanding the mechanics of getting something to animate in Adobe Animate, okay? Great example of what we're going for. Be creative with this. I want you to be creative on all these assignments. Take every opportunity to make something really cool, unseen, and kind of, awesome, okay? Every semester I'm always kind of floored with what you guys create. You guys are artists. This is an art class. I'm expecting you to be creative. Okay, so have fun. There is no expectation as to what this looks like, but use it as an opportunity to make something and get familiar with working inside of Adobe Animate. Okay. Now our homework. Any questions on the lab work? Yeah.
That stuff we were doing just was practice for what we're going to do.
That was practice. Yeah, that was practice. That was practice.
I don't think you technically went over how to make a layer, like you just right click and on the previous layer, and then that's the best way to do it. Or?
The best way of doing it is down here, right there. That's a make a layer button. In the bottom left-hand corner of your timeline, that will create a new empty layer for you to put drawings on. Good question. Thank you for asking. All right. Other questions about your lab work this week? Okay, cool. So let's spend some time talking about your homework. And there's some things in here that we need to kind of go over. As I mentioned, I think last week, this class is all about understanding the core principles of animation. Okay? Animation is an art form that really explores movement. And in that exploration, we have to dissect how things out there in our real world are actually moving and understand why they're moving that way. Animators were great observers. We have to look at something and say, okay, why is it moving like that? This is interesting. This is odd. Movement is always purposeful. Movement is very rarely random. So why are people choosing to walk that way? Why is someone jumping like that? Why is the bird flying like this across the scene? Okay? As animators, we have to kind of pull back the veil of locomotion a little bit and look at its core moving principles, literally moving principles. Okay? Now, every single week, we're going to expand our kind of vernacular, if you will, of these principles of animation. And we're going to start off quite simply by talking about arcs. Okay? Our goal this week for our homework assignment is to create a pendulum swing. And if you look at the example down below on the assignment sheet, you get a really good understanding of the target here. A pendulum, there you go, that's a pendulum. Okay? That's a pendulum. It's an object being suspended from some sort of rope or a board or something that's moving around a fulcrum, a defined kind of pivot spot inside the scene itself. Now, this is a great opportunity for us to look at pendulums and kind of explore timing a little bit as well. Or excuse me, explore arcs and timing. I misspoke. Okay. If you look at the little ball here and specifically look at its motion path, how and why it's moving the way it is, what can you kind of extrapolate for me? What can you tell me about its movement? Say again? Is it moving in a straight line? No, it's not moving in a straight line at all, right? It's odd because if you think about it, it's on the conclusion of a straight line, but that little sphere down there is swinging from a central pivot point, okay? Not moving in a straight line. Nothing in our world moves in a straight line. Everything on our planet moves along an arc. Why? I want to turn some lights on so we can see the board. This is the interactive drawing portion of the day. Here come the lights. Fair warning. Ah, it's so bright. I know, right? Bones don't grow and shrink. Here's the cool thing about the world of animation is that we can break all our bones. You watch Goofy walking down the street. Goofy breaks and snaps his ankle upon every step. We could break all the bones to create an illusion, right? But that illusion should be founded and should be referencing reality. Nothing in our world moves in a straight line, okay? Because of one simple idea. Let me draw an illustration for you on the board to help us kind of get closer and closer to the idea that I'm trying to establish here, okay? Let's pretend that we have a target, okay? Okay. And off screen, or on the side of our frame here, we have a lovely bow and arrow, okay? And we are going to be firing an arrow. It's not in a perspective. This is not going to be a great drawing. So if you're expecting me to draw you a masterpiece on the board, let's temper our expectations a little bit, okay? So this is the target, right? Literally the target. We're trying to shoot the target on the left-hand side. How are we going to animate the arrow flying through the air? Are we going to simply have it go bloop, 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 bloop? No. If this was in perspective and we're trying to establish foreshortening, then it's going to get smaller. Yeah, all that jazz. But let's think about the core movement, not about how we render it, if you will. Make an arc. Why? Gravity. Bingo. That's it. Gravity is the one thing in our world, in our universe, that we cannot turn off, right? It's always pushing and pulling against us. It's always on. It's never off, right? Our animations need to suggest to our audience that gravity is influencing the objects of our animation, right? Okay? We want our animations, our characters, to feel grounded in some sort of reality, right? Well, all realities are influenced by gravity. So we need to suggest its influence on every single thing that we create, okay? So the motion path, the motion path for this arc, or for this arrow, should be really more like an arc, right? I know that you're probably thinking, Pat, in reality, in our reality, if I was really close to that target, the motion path would be a straight line, right? It would be just like, flung, right? That's what you would probably tell me. We are not here to recreate reality, fundamentally, okay? That's not what we're choosing. That's not why we've chosen animation as our art form. We've chosen animation to break reality, to show the abstract, to show things to our audience in a little bit different way so we can draw focus to it. By having it arc way up high like that, just like, boo, right? Or amplify and exaggerating our existence to draw focus to it. We'll come back to exaggeration. That's another principle we'll talk about later. But this idea of an arc establishes gravity. It suggests that this object, this inanimate little piece of artwork here, is being influenced by something outside of its control. Gravity, the universe. It's pulling itself back down to Mother Earth, okay? It's an arc. Okay? Animation is about arcs. Everything starts with an arc. It ends with an arc. Okay? The hallmark of someone who doesn't know what they're doing when it comes to animating is the absence of arcs. Okay? That's a great way to tell if someone knows if they're doing, if they know what they're doing versus what they don't know what they're doing, because you don't see any arcs. Everything is moving in a straight line. Well, nothing moves in a straight line in our world, so we shouldn't have our animations move in a straight line in our world, right? In addition, arcs also make our animations just visually interesting. Who wants to see an arrow just kind of go in a straight line? That's boring. That's dull. It doesn't give us any new opportunities to infuse some additional secondary actions on our movements, right? Everything moves on an arc because it's recreating gravity, and it creates an interesting, kind of flight, interesting motion path, okay? We have a fundamental challenge in our art form in comparison to other art forms, okay? In that we're a timeline-based art form. You guys were checking out the painting in the back classroom. That painting was actually something that was made by a student a couple semesters ago, okay? Yeah, it was really, there's a mural class on campus, and I don't think they fire off every semester, but like every year or 18 months or so, the mural class has a section, and they go around the campus and they say, where is there no art? Let's make art specifically for that room. And I got lucky. Admittedly, I got lucky because during that semester, one of the young ladies that was taking that class was one of my previous students. She's like, Pat, I want to make you a mural for your classroom. I want thumbs up for rock and roll, man. And she came back with this awesome Monster and Night idea, and I love it, right? It's a pretty cool painting. Where was I going with that? I have no idea where I was going with that. I got so ingrained in the awesomeness of that mural, but okay. So our art form is a timeline-based art form, right? If you're a fine artist, the audience can sit and look at that painting for as long as they want. They can just sit there. I mean, if you've ever been to like the Crocker Art Museum, I used to live in Europe, and and it was fantastic because I got to actually go to the Louvre, right, a couple times. It's a fantastic, and what you see people doing, they're just sitting there, staring at artwork, right? And it seems kind of strange because you're like, it's a picture, dude. How long do you need to look at it, right? But good art takes us on this wonderful imaginative journey. At every single corner within this one painting, there's a different story that's being told. That's the power of still photography or still artwork, is that we can just sit there and be enveloped by it. That's not us, though, in the animation business. We're in a time-based, art form. So we have, we're bombarding our audiences not with one image, but 24 images a second, right? We have to create it in a way that's engaging, that's attractive, that sustains their interest throughout the entirety of the animation, just to make sure that they see it. I mean, you guys have seen this firsthand. How often you're flipping through, television, and if it's not interesting in like 2 seconds, you just keep going, right? That is the big challenge that we have in this type of movement-based art form, is that we have to keep our audience's attention for long periods of time. These principles of animation allow us to sustain that interest by making it a little bit more attractive, by adding arcs, by exaggerating things and making it bigger. We're inviting our audience into this entire process, okay? By showing them something a little bit different, okay? And I mean just a little bit different than they're probably expecting to see. They're now an active participant in the message that we're sending them, right? Instead of them passively being a consumer of our artwork, they're now going, wait, now what's going to happen? In reality, the arrow would not go up that high, but in this animation it did. Why? What's going to happen next? Is the arrow going to sprout arms and legs and run across the entire field? I don't know. I'm engaged. I want to see what happens, right? It makes sure that our audience gets to the end of our animation. These principles recreate the illusion of life, but they also sustain the interest in the movements. So they're really important, okay? They're really important. So arcs. All things move on an arcs. If you want to fail an assignment in here, have it move in a straight line, because nothing in our world, nothing in our universe moves in a straight line, okay? Everything is going to move along a circular path, an arc, okay, to remind us of gravity and to create an interesting motion path that keeps our audience engaged, okay? Now, your challenge this week is to animate an object at the end of a string. Now, I don't care what that object is. I'll let you be creative and have fun with it, okay? and then animate that object along an arc. Okay? But as our arcs establish a sense of gravity, an illusion that things are pushing and pulling on our objects, we need to at times be a little bit more direct with our audience's understanding of gravity and how it's interpreting or how it's recreating the speed of our movement. Now, if you look very carefully at the example that I provided you on the website, I want you to look at the speed, how fast it's moving. Watch it a couple cycles and really start to look at the speed. Not how it's moving or why it's moving, but how fast it's moving. What do you guys see? Yeah, it goes fast in some parts and slow in others, right? Why? Gravity. Okay? We're intentionally slowing things down and speeding things up to remind our audience on the influence of gravity on our objects, right? So now we need to go in and establish the timing of it, okay? So if this is our object that we're going to be animating on our pendulum, okay? And if this is, so this is what I always do. I always create my arcs first. This is not going to be a good arc. No, it's not bad. I've done worse. I did ones that was like really curvy over here and then like a straight line on that side. Anyways, okay, so if this is the middle frame of our animation, I can prototype pretty quickly that this is going to be the first frame of my animation, and then I'll have another drawing over here that represents the last frame of my animation, okay? So this will be frame 1, and let's just to make the math a little bit easier here, that's going to be frame 12. Okay, so if that's frame 1 and that's frame 12, what is the middle? Yeah, 6. Okay, so this is frame 6. All right, where am I going to position frames 2, 3, 4, and 5? So we're going like this. Okay, these are easy. These are the extreme poses of the movement, right? That's the easy part. The hard part comes in drawing all the in-betweens, okay? Now, to recreate the illusion of gravity, we need to adjust the timing of our animation. So we got two principles of animation that we're looking at, arcs and timing. Arcs is about establishing a motion path. Timing is all about speed, on how an object moves along that motion path, right? I've established my arc. Let's figure out how fast this motion's going to happen, or this movement's going to happen now. Okay? Now, in the world of animation, in order for us to create something, or to create the illusion that something is moving slow, we bunch the drawings up close to each other. We do a little overlap, okay? So instead of drawing, frame 2 like down here, okay? So if this was frame 2, the distance the ball would travel between frames is pretty extreme, right? It's going pretty far inside the composition of my shot. So the illusion that we're going to create here is something very fast, okay? The speed is going to be pretty fast. Now, in order to slow things down, we create a lot of overlap, okay? So maybe frame 2 is right there. Frame 3, not as far crunched up. There's frame 3. I'll make that frame 5. Here's will be frame 4. So it's really tight in here. So the distance the ball is traveling in between each frame is very small. The perception that we get here is of slower movement. Okay? And when we want it to be moving really fast, we spread all our animation frames apart. Okay? And what's cool about this is that you can prototype your movement pretty fast. I'll do a little bit better of a way of drawing this. Okay? Because now you can see that it's moving pretty fast down here. Because look how far the ball is moving in between frame 5, 6, 7. Pretty big distance traveling, right? And then as it goes into the upward arc, now it starts to slow down. Gravity is beginning to pull on our object, and it's going to start slowing it down. Okay? So on our pendulum, it should be moving the fastest at the bottom of the arc. where gravity is having the least influence, excuse me, the most influence on the speed of our object. Okay? You're going to spend the next 20 years of your careers thinking about timing. Okay? It's the most difficult thing to teach, okay? Because it requires experience, okay? You're going to find that probably the biggest thing that I jump up and down about in this class, and the comment that I'm going to tell each and every one of you over the next 15 weeks now, is that we need to look at your timing. We need to figure out how to make things go slow and how to make things go fast. At the end of the day, ultimately, we want all of our animations to be like a good roller coaster ride, right? Does anyone like roller coasters in here? I kind of like roller coasters, like kind of, a little bit, right? It has to be the right roller coaster. Some just like make me sick, right? But others are a good ride, right? We want our animations to be like a good roller coaster ride. A good roller coaster is not all the exact same speed, right? As you go through that experience of riding the ride, there are parts of the roller coaster that are going really fast, and then other parts where you slow down and take a couple of breaths, right? You know, for me, it's always that moment of panic. What's the first thing you do whenever you go on, when you're on a roller coaster ride? Yeah, click, 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 click. That first like uphill, right? You go. I love and hate that first moment on a roller coaster because there's so much anticipation, right? It's click, 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 click. And you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die, right? And then you get up to the top of the hill and you're like, ah! As you go down the hill, and they go really fast down that first hill. And then as you go up the second hill, you start to slow down. And you're able to breathe for a couple seconds, and then you go down the hill again, and you're down the hill, you go through the curves and all this stuff, and then you go through the loop, and then finally you start to slow down a little bit, and you hit another hill, and click, 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 going back up to the top of the ride again, right? We want our animations to be the exact same way, right? We want to have areas where there's extreme movement, where things are moving very, very fast, right? And then we pair that with extreme slowness, right? We create contrast between our speeds, which highlights each of those areas individually. On a good roller coaster, you remember the slow parts just as much as you remember the fast parts, right? Because they're different. And when something's different, it sticks out in our brain. If the roller coaster was the exact same speed throughout the entire ride, what experience are you left with? Traumatizing? If it's the exact same speed? If it's just slow? Nice and slow, right? It's boring. No one wants to go on a boring roller coaster, right? It's unmemorable, okay? You don't think about it after you've gotten off that ride. It doesn't grab your attention, and it doesn't sustain your attention throughout the duration of the roller coaster ride. We don't want a flat experience. These are called linear animations, and we will absolutely see some of these going forward in the future, where there are no areas of extreme speed next to areas of extreme slowness, okay? So when you're plotting out your animation frames this week for your homework, remember that we want to try to infuse every single frame with a suggestion of gravity. By having it slow down, go fast in the middle, and then slow down at the conclusion of its movement arc, we're telling our audience that this object is grounded in a reality who's kind of participating in the influence of gravity. Okay? Make sense? Everyone kind of feeling it? Yeah? All right. So there's two things that we're striving to accomplish this week. The lab, which should go pretty fast, okay? And then your homework, okay? Same kind of process for your homework, okay? Let's get on the same page here for a second. 27 frames, okay? 3 complete swings for your homework, 27 frames, okay? Welcome to animating in this class.
Can I make it 4 because that is killing my head seeing you jump?
Absolutely. I have no problem with that. If you want to make it 4 swings, rock and roll, man. I'm never going to say no to going above and beyond the minimum expectations for our assignments. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Is it really bugging you that bad? That's not like looping perfectly? Yeah. Okay. All right. I'll fix it. Alrighty, folks. That's it for us this week. We will see you guys next week. Have a wonderful week.